Do murder hobos kill storylines? Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. I was watching some videos on YouTube and someone was talking about things that people don't like, and one was murder hobos, and they came up with the phrase or three things about murder hobos. It says, one, you can't solve everything with a sword, and two, you can't kill everything, and three, you can't solve a riddle with a sword. And I thought about that, and that didn't sound right. And those of you who know that have watched me know I have a little bit of military background. And I heard the first version of this in the military, but supposedly this is attributed to Scott Adams. And what Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, wrote, there are very few personal problems that cannot be solved through a suitable application of high explosives. The way I actually heard it was, there are few problems in life that cannot be solved through a sufficient application of high explosives. And this came from some people who were in combat engineers. If you understand what combat engineers were like, you know that they like to play with high explosives. So their argument, number one, you can't solve everything with a sword. Well, you solve it with high explosives. And you can't kill everything. Well, we just recently dropped the mother of all bombs, which is the second largest conventional weapon in the world. The Russians actually have one they call the father of all bombs, which is actually 4 times bigger, but they've never dropped it in anger or in combat. We've dropped the mother of all bombs, we've dropped in combat, which was actually larger than the previous version, which was called the Daisy Cutter, which we'd dropped at Tora Bora before. But so those are sufficient applications of high explosives. Few problems in life cannot be solved through sufficient application of high explosives. Now, if you're playing a non-RPG, like fantasy role-playing game, but you're playing something a little bit more modern, yeah, that's always fun. I always used to have fun watching some of the videos going back to Halo 1, where the Warthog was basically indestructible, and people would get the Warthog in various places by throwing grenades underneath it and exploding it. I remember there was once where they got the Warthog into some place that you shouldn't have been able to get a Warthog. But that's sufficient application of high explosives. And so they said, line one, you can't solve everything with a sword, or you can't solve everything through violence, I guess is a better way to word it. Yeah, okay. What happens is, I think if you have sufficient application of high explosive, you probably can kill just about anything. It says, and you can't kill everything. Well, again, you take a look at some extreme bombs that have done that, and all the bombs do is that it makes it much easier. You take a look at what people have done over the centuries. The classic one was when Spartacus rebelled against Rome, and at the end there were all these slaves who were taken as captive, and they decided that they would be, as a example, they crucified them along the road all the way back to Rome. So you can kill a large number of people if you've got some people who are as efficient as the Romans were. And then the third question is, you can't solve a riddle with a sword. And that one is an interesting all by itself, because I remember the story of Alexander the Great and the Gordian Knot. And the Gordian Knot was a form of a riddle. And Alexander the Great actually did solve a riddle or a challenge or whatever you want to call it with a sword, because he cut it. It's also the idea that you think outside the box. Another argument that I heard about why murder hobos were bad was that murder hobos kill important NPCs. And I go, what? What do you mean? So I have read the Game of Thrones books, Game of Thrones, Clash of Kings, Storm of Swords, A Feast of Crows, and Dance of Dragons. So if you've read the books or you watch the series on HBO, you know George R. R. Martin is infamous for killing characters. Any of you who have seen, the Red Wedding, as it's called, you kill these characters who are main characters, and at the end of, in the book one where they kill Eddard Stark, you're not really expecting that, and then they behead him, and so all these NPCs are there, and they ask George R. R. Martin about it, and he says, well, to him, they're all dead. He knows he knows when every character is going to die. When he creates a character, he knows when it's going to die. So it has that. To me, the other approach is to think of the NPCs like the Lernaean Hydra, or may not be able to, the Hydra, where you kill one NPC and two spring up to take his place or her place, because you're the game master, you're the dungeon master. You can create NPCs quickly. I've actually done some videos about using a script to create NPCs. So no NPC should be that important. You can always replace them, because just like characters are replaceable, NPCs are replaceable. You may have this great and wonderful NPC that you love, but just like George R. R. Martin, you learn that, maybe that character needs to die. And if the players decide or figure some way to off an NPC that you were fond of, doesn't mean you can't bring them back. Like I said, you could always raise them from the dead and bring them back, which would give them a nice reason to be against the player characters. But we're playing in fantasy games, or if you're playing in a futuristic game, what happens is that you could have the clone of that character come back. Keep thinking about Paranoia. If you've ever played the role-playing game of Paranoia, where you have 6 player characters all identical. Yes, and characters die, and then you get a new one when later at the end of the adventure. But it's an interesting approach, is just let them kill the characters. And of course you can recreate new NPCs. This goes back to the idea of a world-driven story. That your world is a moving, changing thing all of itself. That you've created a world, and the cogs are turning and so on, and the player characters may be turning some cogs, but some of them may be turning by themselves. And if the players kill an important NPC, that's turning a cog. That doesn't mean that source of power is gone. What happens is, anybody who knows, you don't get rid of a very powerful organization is not just one person. You may get rid of the person at the top, but you have all the people below them. And, it's like the mafia, which was the story, criminal enterprises, that you kill the big boss and there's some others that are immediately going to step into there. In the military, you learn, yes, so you've killed the general. Well, the colonel takes his place. And the colonel takes the rank of that, the general, and it just keeps on going. And what happens is, it's called succession planning in business. You should be able to handle someone needing to disappear because of various reasons. Sometimes, it's the analogy we do at work is, they found the winning lottery ticket on the sidewalk on the way to work. And yes, you never hear from them again. It's better than the phrase, that person got run over by a bus, which is the other one. But, NPCs, they could have run over by the bus, or the player characters could have come in and given a big bribe to an NPC, and now the NPC isn't dead, but they've disappeared because they're no longer where they were, because the characters have been given them enough. And all of those things you have to be prepared for as your game master or dungeon master. So let's turn this slightly differently. Instead of offing the characters, imagine the characters where they've got a reasonable amount of treasure, and what they're doing is that if they're high enough level, they come up to the NPCs and give them a quest or a geos. and send the NPCs off doing something. Or they just bribe them. I want you to disappear. And depending upon the amount of bribe and how much money they have, they could totally derail people's initial plan for your story. But you have to be prepared for that. It just changes who's in charge. So you have somebody step up into their place and take over, and it may be a different NPC with different characteristics and a different personality, but so what? It still keeps the adventure going. So why do you, all these issues of why murder hobos are bad, to me it seems like the dungeon master or game master is not prepared to handle those situations, and they should be. I'd like to hear your comments about this. What do you think? Do you think I'm just making it too easy, making it too flippant? Do you think, what have you done? Have you, as a game master, have you prepared a succession plan if the player's off your favorite non-player character? What would you do if they did off them? Could you keep going with the adventure, or would you just end the adventure, which I've actually heard some people do when the players do something? I'd like to hear comments. Thank you for watching my video. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, press the thumbs up button. You can subscribe by clicking the link in the lower left. If you are interested, there are links to more content.